Laura slammed the tray onto the counter, her voice cracking in fury. She's just a child, not a spectacle for your experiments. Across the table, Naoko's eyes burned with authority, her polished nails tapping like gunshots against the glass. Lily shrank in her chair, clutching the notebook that held her secret world. And then, with trembling lips, the girl whispered something in flawless Japanese that silenced them both. What would you have done in Laura's place? The trattoria was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the rich aroma of garlic and fresh basil wafting from the kitchen. Florence, in the evening, had its own magic, and for Laura Williams it was another long night of weaving between crowded tables with plates balanced in her hands. Her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, sat tucked in the corner booth with a sketch pad, waiting patiently for her mother to finish her shift. It was the kind of small family restaurant where regulars lingered long after dessert, where travelers found comfort in familiar Italian warmth. No one expected that night to shatter its easy rhythm. At a table near the window, a woman sat alone. Her presence commanded quiet attention even before anyone knew who she was. She wore an elegant cream-colored jacket, her black hair tied in a sleek twist, her leather briefcase resting against the chair leg. She was Naoko Sato, a Japanese millionaire, whose name often appeared in international financial magazines. But here in Florence, surrounded by tourists and locals sipping Chianti, no one recognized her, nor did anyone care. She looked like another successful traveler enjoying pasta in peace. Until her breathing changed. It started with a subtle wince, her hand moving to her chest, as though brushing away discomfort. Within seconds, her composure cracked. She tried to call out, her voice sharp but broken. "Tasukete, onegaishimasu." The words came in rapid Japanese, clipped by short, shallow breaths. At first, the nearby diners assumed she had coughed, maybe choked on a sip of wine. But then her voice rose, desperate, trembling with urgency. "Kurushi." Tasukete Laura froze midway through delivering a plate of risotto, her eyes darting toward the window table. The room fell into stunned silence. The woman's chair scraped backward as she staggered slightly, clutching the edge of the table with manicured hands. A glass toppled and shattered. Her words tumbled out like fragments no one could assemble. The waiters looked at one another, bewildered. A man in a dark jacket leaned toward his wife. "What language is that?" he muttered. She shook her head wide-eyed. Laura rushed forward, instinct tightening her chest. "Madam, are you all right?" she asked in English, then tried Italian, her voice louder. "Sta bene, bisogno di aiuto." But Naoko's eyes were wild, locked in panic. Her breath came in harsh bursts, her sentences sharp and foreign, pleading into the void. Not a single person in the trattoria could make sense of her words. An older couple whispered nervously. A student pulled out his phone, typing Japanese emergency phrases into a translation app that fumbled clumsy syllables across the screen. The room thickened with helplessness. Even Laura's hands trembled as she tried to guide the woman toward calm. "Please just sit down, help is coming," she said, though she knew the words were meaningless to the woman gasping before her. Her eyes darted across the room, desperate for anyone who could bridge the impossible gap between life and understanding. And then from the corner booth a small voice cut through the panic. "Sumimasen." Lily said softly, stepping into the center of the chaos. Her blonde hair fell in loose curls over her shoulders, her sketch pad forgotten on the table behind her. She walked toward the woman with surprising steadiness for a child. The restaurant seemed to inhale all at once, stunned into watching. Naoko's head turned sharply, eyes wide at the sound of her own language. Lily's words followed, careful but clear. "Daijobu desu ka kokyu o yukuri shite kudasai." The girl's pronunciation was crisp, confident, impossibly fluent for someone her age. The desperate, frantic rhythm of Naoko's voice faltered, as if a hand had suddenly steadied her. Relief flickered across her face as she latched onto the lifeline. "She's saying she can't breathe well." Lily turned and explained quickly in English. Her voice was high but steady. "Her chest hurts. She needs help right now. Call emergency services." The trattoria snapped into motion. Chairs scraped back, someone dialed the emergency number, others moved aside to give space. Laura stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring at her daughter as though she had never truly seen her before. Naoko's knees buckled slightly and Lily guided her back into the chair with hands too small, yet strangely commanding. She kept speaking gently in Japanese voice, soft but firm, like she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "Yukuri, daijoubu, watashi to isho ni." "Breathe slowly. You're not alone." The woman's eyes filled with tears as her breathing struggled into rhythm, each inhale ragged but steadier than before. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but by then Lily had already established herself as translator, explaining symptoms with startling accuracy. She used words far beyond what one would expect from a 10-year-old, bridging between the medical team and Naoko's frightened eyes. She says her heart feels heavy and her head is spinning. She hasn't eaten since morning, only coffee, Lily reported. The professionals exchanged looks of astonishment before moving into swift, efficient action. All the while, the trattoria remained hushed, the weight of disbelief pressing on every patron. Strangers who moments before had been sipping wine now watched in silence, as a little girl performed a role no adult could fill. The cook stood in the doorway, apron stained, wiping his hands with nervous energy. The student with the phone had stopped typing altogether, staring at Lily with open-mouthed awe. Even Laura, usually quick to command any crisis in her restaurant, could only grip the edge of the counter, her breath, uneven eyes locked on her daughter. When Naoko was finally stabilized and prepared for transport, she reached out with trembling fingers and caught Lily's hand. "Anata wa tenshi desu," she whispered in Japanese. "You are an angel." The words carried more weight than the girl could have known. Lily smiled shyly, bowing her head in a gesture she had seen countless times in the shows and lessons she secretly studied. "Ganbatte kudasai," she replied softly. "Please be strong." As the ambulance doors closed and the siren echoed into the Florence night, the trattoria remained suspended in a spell. People looked to Laura for explanation, but she had none. Her daughter had just spoken a language she herself could not understand, had comforted a stranger no one else could reach. For a long moment, mother and daughter faced each other across the restaurant floor, the air heavy with shock and something deeper, something shifting that neither could name. Laura's hands shook as she whispered almost to herself, "Lily, how?" But Lily, still standing where Naoko had clutched her hand, simply lowered her eyes, as if she carried secrets larger than the room could hold. The night had begun like any other in Florence, but now the walls seemed to hum with a story no one present would ever forget. Laura could not sleep that night. Even after the trattoria had emptied and the chairs were turned upside down on the tables, her mind refused to settle. She kept replaying the image of her daughter, standing in the center of the restaurant, speaking to the desperate woman in a language Laura herself could not follow. The sound of those words, strange yet graceful, echoed like music in her ears. It had not been memorized fragments or childish mimicry. It had been fluent, confident, and deeply human, and it terrified her because she realized she had no idea who her daughter was becoming when she wasn't watching. Lily, on the other hand, seemed calm. She curled on the narrow bed they shared in their small apartment above the trattoria, flipping through her notebook by the light of a desk lamp. Rows of characters filled the pages, neat columns of hiragana and kanji with little doodles in the margins. She had drawn cherry blossoms around one phrase, a steaming bowl of ramen next to another. To her, the symbols were not foreign. They were friends she had been living with for years, waiting for the chance to step out of hiding. She pressed her pencil to the page, whispering softly as she wrote Kokoro Heart. Laura watched from the doorway, caught between wonder and guilt. How long had her daughter been carrying this secret? How had she, a mother who prided herself on being attentive despite long shifts and aching feet, failed to notice? The realization stung. Lily had built a world of her own, one her mother had never entered. For 3 years, while Laura worked double hours to keep a roof over their heads, Lily had been building fluency in silence. She had spent afternoons watching Japanese shows online, scribbling down words, rewinding and repeating until her tongue moved with ease. She had borrowed books from the library, finding children's folk tales and language guides that no one thought to question. She had used old apps on Laura's phone, slipping them open like secret doors into another country. And she had done it all alone. The next morning, Laura tried to ask gently over breakfast, "Sweetheart, when did you start learning all that?" Her voice wavered, balancing between pride and unease. Lily shrugged, spooning yogurt with a casualness that felt rehearsed. "When I was 7, I wanted to know what the characters were saying without subtitles." She looked up with clear blue eyes, matter of fact, though explaining a small hobby. "I didn't think it was important enough to tell you." Laura's throat tightened. "Not important?" She wanted to protest, to shout about how extraordinary it was, but she stopped herself. She saw in her daughter's face the quiet fear of disappointing her, the same fear that had likely kept Lily silent all this time. Instead, Laura reached across the table and covered Lily's hand. "It's the most important thing in the world to me. You are." The gift Lily revealed that night in the trattoria was not simply about language. It was about resilience, imagination, and the stubborn drive of a child who refused to be confined by her circumstances. In a small apartment above a busy restaurant with no tutors and no formal lessons, she had stitched together her own education. While other children her age were memorizing multiplication tables, Lily was practicing intonation and stroke order. Where others collected toys, she collected phrases, sounds, and symbols that opened a window into another culture. Her secret was not only that she had taught herself Japanese. Her secret was that she had taught herself how to believe she could do it. When news spread through Florence about the night at the trattoria, the story quickly became a local curiosity. Regulars stopped by and asked Laura in hushed voices, "Is it true? Did your little girl really save that woman by speaking Japanese?" Laura would nod, still trying to believe it herself. Lily became both admired and misunderstood. Some neighbors clapped her on the shoulder, calling her brilliant. Others whispered behind their hands, wondering how a child could know so much without formal training. But Lily remained untouched by the noise. For her, the joy lay in the learning itself, in unlocking a story written in characters that once looked impossible. At school, however, it was different. The lessons felt slow, predictable, and repetitive. Teachers praised her neat handwriting and quick answers, but none knew the depth of what she carried. Sometimes she deliberately gave wrong answers so her classmates wouldn't roll their eyes at her. She wanted friends, not envy. She wanted to belong even as her mind insisted on running ahead. It was only in her notebooks and on quiet evenings in the apartment that she let herself stretch into the brilliance she had cultivated. Laura began to notice the evidence scattered everywhere. Sticky notes taped to the wall with Japanese words for colors, a stack of hand-drawn flashcards with kanji characters on one side and little pictures on the other, old library slips tucked into the corners of well-thumbed books. The apartment was less a home than a hidden classroom, and Laura realized with awe that her daughter had been living a double life, ordinary schoolgirl by day, determined linguist by night. The more Laura discovered, the more conflicted she became. Pride swelled in her chest, but so did fear. What did this mean for Lily's future? Was it healthy for a child to be so far ahead? Would she lose her childhood in the rush to grow up? Laura worried that the world might not be kind to a girl who stood out too much. And yet, she could not deny the truth. Lily's gift was real, and it was shaping her into someone remarkable. For Lily, the night at the trattoria had been a turning point too. For the first time, her hidden world had been forced into the open. She had not only spoken Japanese, she had saved someone with it. The language that had been her private adventure now became proof that even the smallest voice could matter. As she lay in bed that week, she replayed the image of Naoko's eyes softening with relief, the feel of her trembling hand gripping her own. She thought about how a stranger had called her an angel, and she whispered the words to herself, testing them in both languages. Angel. Tenshi. The secret was no longer just hers. It belonged to her mother now, and to the woman whose life she had touched. And though she did not yet know it, it was the beginning of something larger than she could imagine, a path that would stretch far beyond the walls of the little apartment in Florence, a path that had only just begun to unfold. 3 days later, the trattoria bustled with its usual rhythm. The clatter of cutlery, the hum of conversation in multiple languages, the comforting aroma of tomato sauce simmering in the kitchen. It was as though nothing extraordinary had ever happened. Yet for Laura, every sound felt sharper, every detail heavier. She had been waiting uncertain, wondering if they would ever see the elegant woman again. Part of her hoped the whole episode had simply vanished into memory. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. That afternoon, the lunch rush had reached its peak when the trattoria door opened, and silence seemed to sweep in. Naoko Sato stood in the doorway, no longer the distressed stranger gasping for help, but a commanding presence dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair gleaming in the Tuscan sunlight. A leather briefcase swung lightly at her side, and her heels clicked against the tiled floor with quiet authority. Heads turned as if an invisible chord had been struck. She carried the aura of someone used to being noticed, and though no one in the room recognized her name, they felt her significance in the air. Laura nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. For a moment she froze, her heart racing. She had wondered whether Naoko had even survived that night, and now here she was, not only alive, but radiating strength. Gathering herself, Laura hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh my goodness, you're back," she said, her voice betraying a mix of relief and nervousness. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," Naoko replied, her English accented but polished, her voice steady. "Thanks to your daughter." Her eyes swept the room as if searching for something, and then they found Lily bent over a notebook in the corner booth, pencil in hand. Naoko's expression softened instantly. "Is that her? The little angel who saved my life?" Laura nodded. "That's my Lily. She's been asking about you every day." Her throat tightened with pride and worry all at once. Naoko walked across the room with graceful confidence, her steps measured yet warm. She approached the booth, and Lily looked up, startled at first. Then her face lit with recognition. "Sato-san," Lily said in Japanese, her voice tinged with both shyness and joy. "Did you get better?" "Yes," Lily Naoko answered, switching into Japanese without hesitation. "Thanks to you. May I sit with you?" Lily nodded eagerly, moving her schoolbooks aside. Laura hovered nearby, uncertain, caught between gratitude and unease. Naoko lowered herself into the booth, her movements elegant, her gaze fixed on the girl. "You were very brave that night, and your Japanese astonishing. Where did you learn to speak so fluently?" she asked, though her tone carried more admiration than interrogation. Lily blushed, glancing at her mother before answering. "Mostly from watching shows and reading." I wanted to understand without subtitles, so I practiced. Every day. Her words spilled out softly, her honesty disarming. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook, offering it shyly. These are my notes. Naoko opened the worn book and flipped through its pages. Neatly drawn characters lined every page, accompanied by translations, small sketches, and practice sentences. Some pages were filled with proverbs, others with song lyrics carefully transcribed. Naoko's eyes widened, with each turn her disbelief growing into something closer to awe. She looked up slowly. This is university-level work, and you are only 10. Lily bit her lip, her hands twisting in her lap. Sometimes I worry I make mistakes because I don't have anyone to practice with, she admitted. Naoko shook her head firmly. Your pronunciation is nearly perfect. You have a gift, Lily, a rare one. Laura felt her stomach knot. She wanted to beam with pride, but fear tugged at her. She knew how harsh the world could be toward children who stood out too brightly. She wanted to protect her daughter's innocence, to keep her safe within the boundaries of their small, ordinary life. But as she watched Naoko lean forward, speaking with genuine interest, she also knew opportunities like this did not come twice. Naoko turned toward Laura, her expression softening. You must be very proud, raising such a remarkable girl. Laura managed a smile. I am, more than I can say. But I don't want her to lose the chance to just be a child. I understand, Naoko said gently, her voice carrying a shadow of something personal, a memory perhaps. When I was Lily's age, I was like her. Curious, restless, learning things far beyond my years. But my family didn't see it as a gift. They saw it as a problem. I don't want that for her. The trattoria hummed faintly around them, but at that table time seemed to still. Naoko reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small wrapped package. She slid it across the table toward Lily. For you, a token of gratitude. Lily unwrapped it, carefully revealing a beautifully bound book of Japanese folk tales, written entirely in kanji and hiragana. Her eyes widened, reverence softening her features. For me, yes, Naoko said. I want you to keep learning, to keep dreaming. Stories are bridges, Lily, and you already know how to cross them. Tears pricked Laura's eyes as she watched her daughter cradle the book like treasure. Naoko lingered a while longer, asking Lily questions about her favorite characters, her methods of study her dreams. She listened as though every word mattered, never once dismissing the child's thoughts as trivial. And when she finally rose to leave, she looked at Laura with quiet determination. Your daughter saved my life. I will never forget it. If you'll allow me, I would like to give her something in return. Not money, not gifts, opportunity. Laura swallowed hard, torn between gratitude and instinctive caution. The trattoria door closed behind Naoko, and the room slowly returned to its noise and warmth. But Laura knew nothing would ever be quite the same again. For the first time, she realized that Lily's secret gift had opened a door neither of them had expected, and now they stood at the threshold of something much larger than their quiet life above the trattoria. Paris was gray with early spring rain when Laura and Lily stepped off the train, their coats buttoned against the chill. Naoko had arranged everything, hotel rooms, appointments, even a car waiting at the station. It all felt like too much for Laura, who had spent years measuring every euro and calculating every meal. She wanted to protest, to insist on paying her own way, but Naoko had been firm. This is not charity, she had said. It is gratitude. And so Laura allowed herself to be carried along, holding Lily's hand, as they entered a city that seemed too grand for their small lives. The testing center was housed in a stately stone building near the Sorbonne. Inside, walls lined with books gave the impression of a quiet university. yet the rooms buzzed with focused energy. Specialists greeted them with polite warmth, their clipboards ready, their questions gentle but probing. Lily was led into a room with glass panels where she sat at a table across from two examiners. Laura and Naoko watched from behind the glass, their reflections faint in the window. Laura's palms were damp. She had never seen her daughter in this light before, on display studied like a rare phenomenon. The tasks began simply pattern recognition puzzles, memory games, listening exercises in unfamiliar languages. Lily leaned into each one with ease, her pencil moving quickly, her eyes bright with curiosity. Then came the language trials. The examiners introduced her to phrases in Mandarin, Arabic, and Russian, each spoken by a different native speaker on a screen. Within minutes, she was not only repeating the sounds, but shaping them into new sentences, asking questions back. The examiners exchanged glances, scribbling notes faster. Laura's chest swelled with pride, then tightened with fear. This was more than talent, it was something extraordinary, and she wondered if extraordinary was safe. Naoko, standing beside her, watched with quiet intensity. "She's not just repeating," she murmured. "She's building." She sees the structure. There was admiration in her voice, but something else, too. Something wistful, almost pained. Laura caught it, but said nothing. After hours of testing, they sat with Dr. Etienne Marceau, a specialist in gifted children who had spent decades studying unusual minds. His verdict was delivered in calm, measured tones. Lily demonstrates what we classify as profoundly gifted linguistic intelligence. He explained, his French accent soft. Her ability to acquire and manipulate language is extraordinary, possibly in the top fraction of a percent. What is equally remarkable is her emotional regulation. Most children with such cognitive acceleration struggle socially, but your daughter remains balanced, empathetic, deeply attuned to others. He looked directly at Laura. She will need a carefully designed program. Ordinary schooling will not only bore her, it may harm her enthusiasm for learning. Laura's throat tightened. But she's only 10. She still plays with dolls. I don't want her childhood taken away. Dr. Marceau folded his hands. Then our goal must be balance. We can challenge her mind while protecting her heart. With the right support, she can have both. That evening, back in the hotel, Lily flipped through her new book of Japanese folk tales, reading aloud, while Laura pretended to focus on the view of the Seine. She was listening, but her mind was restless. Opportunity felt like a door, wide open, yet beyond it lay a future she could not predict. She wanted to protect her daughter from being pulled into a life too big, too heavy. But she also knew that shutting the door would be its own kind of harm. It was Naoko who broke the silence. She sat near the window, her silhouette dark against the city lights. "When I was her age, I longed for someone to see me the way you see her," she said. "My parents were too busy building their empire. They ignored my gifts until it was too late, until I had already turned cold." Her voice trembled on the edge of memory. "I will not let her go through what I did." Laura studied her, uncertain. "Why does this matter so much to you? You barely knew us a month ago." Naoko hesitated, her eyes drifting to Lily, who had fallen asleep with the folktale book still open on her chest. "Because once years ago I knew someone in America. A man. He was kind and brilliant in his own quiet way. He spoke of dreams of building a life full of meaning, not money. For a brief time I believed him. And then I lost him. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed." She paused, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. His name was Daniel Williams. Laura felt the breath knock out of her. The name hit like a stone dropped into still water. "Daniel Williams," she whispered. Her late husband, the man who had vanished from her life so many years ago. The father Lily barely remembered. Naoko's face shifted, realization dawning. He was your husband. Laura nodded slowly, her pulse thundering in her ears. The room seemed to tilt. He died when Lily was very small. A car accident. Her voice broke on the last word. Naoko pressed a hand to her mouth, stunned. I never knew. When I left America, I thought I had only lost a chance at love. I didn't realize I had lost family. Her eyes glistened, grief and guilt tangled in their depths. Laura looked at her daughter, peaceful in sleep, her small hands resting on the book that had brought all of this to light. Questions whirled about the past, about what Naoko truly meant, about how fate could twist so cruelly, and yet land them all in the same place years later. She wanted to be angry, to push Naoko away for dredging up a name that still haunted her. But she also felt a strange pull, a sense that this connection was not coincidence. It was part of something larger, a story still unfolding. Naoko reached across the table, her voice low. Laura, I can't change what happened, but I can choose what happens now. Let me help Lily, let me give her what I never had. Not to erase my mistakes, but to honor what was lost. Laura held her gaze torn between mistrust and an undeniable sense of destiny. Outside, the Seine shimmered under the streetlights, carrying its secrets quietly downstream. Inside, 3 lives, past, present, and future, were colliding in ways none of them could yet fully understand. The weeks that followed in Florence were filled with quiet shifts neither Laura nor Lily could fully name. Life at the trattoria carried on tables, to clear plates, to balance the rhythm of survival that had shaped their days for years. Yet, beneath the ordinary, something was different. The night Naoko Sato walked back into their world, she had left behind more than a promise. She had opened a door, and now the air around them carried possibility. Naoko kept her word. She returned often, sometimes for coffee between meetings, sometimes for long dinners when the trattoria quieted after closing. She spoke to Lily with patient respect, never talking down to her, always curious about what she was reading or discovering. And to Laura, she offered not just gratitude, but companionship. They began to speak late into the night, sharing stories of childhoods marked by absence and ambition, by dreams and disappointments. Laura found herself surprised at how easily she trusted this woman who had once been a stranger. And Naoko, who had built empires and traveled the globe, found something grounding in the warmth of a small apartment above a busy street. It was Lily who seemed to sense the shape of it all before the adults did. One evening, as she worked on a Mandarin exercise, Naoko had suggested she looked up and said simply, "We feel like a family now." Her voice was light, but her words sank deep. Laura felt her heart tighten, and Naoko's hand stilled on the teacup she was holding. No one corrected the child, because in some unspoken way she was right. The testing results from Paris arrived officially confirming what the specialists had already told them. Lily was profoundly gifted, her aptitude beyond standard measure. Opportunities poured in, scholarships offers from international programs, invitations to conferences. Laura read through them with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the weight of choice. She wanted to protect Lily from being consumed by expectation. She wanted her daughter to have laughter and play, to chase fireflies in the summer, and spill ice cream down her shirt, not just sit in rooms where people measured her brilliance. Yet she also knew she could not hold Lily back. The world had glimpsed her gift, and the world would not let go. One evening, as rain pattered against the apartment window, Laura spoke the words she had carried like a stone in her chest. If we agree to this, if we let her step into this life, I have conditions. She looked at Naoko firmly. Her happiness comes first. If any of this makes her lose the joy she has now, we stop. I won't trade her childhood for someone else's vision of greatness. Naoko met her gaze without hesitation. Agreed, and you will be involved in every decision. I may have resources, but you are her mother. No one knows her better than you." The certainty in her tone eased the tightness in Laura's chest, though the fear never fully disappeared. They signed no contracts, drew no lines of ownership. Instead, they built something fragile but real, a promise bound by trust. Naoko would sponsor Lily's education, opening doors to tutors and programs no waitress could ever afford. Laura would guard her daughter's spirit, ensuring that every opportunity remained a gift, not a burden. And Lily, wide-eyed and hopeful, would step into a future that shimmered brighter than any of them had imagined. It wasn't only education that shifted. Slowly, the shadows of the past wove into the present. Laura learned more about Nyoko's brief connection with Daniel Williams, her late husband, and the memories she thought she had buried began to stir. At first, the knowledge hurt, a reminder of what she had lost, of the roads never taken. But with time, the pain softened into something else. Perhaps Daniel had been a thread binding them all, even across years and continents. Perhaps Lily's gift was not coincidence, but inheritance, a spark carried forward in unexpected ways. Naoko, too, seemed to change. The hard edges she wore like armor softened when she was with Laura and Lily. She still traveled, still commanded rooms with her authority, but in Florence she let herself linger at the trattoria, laughing at Lily's quick wit, listening to Laura's stories about life among clattering plates and crowded tables. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to belong somewhere, not because of her title, but because of who she was when the title fell away. The city around them carried on tourists drifting through the piazzas, students filling cafes with chatter, the Arno glinting gold beneath the bridges at dusk. But inside the trattoria and the small apartment above, a new story was being written. It was not about wealth or talent alone. It was about the quiet miracle of 3 lives colliding, each broken in different ways, each finding strength in the others. One night, as the bells of Florence tolled softly in the distance, Laura tucked Lily into bed. The girl clutched her folktale book, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Mama," she whispered, "do you think Daddy would be proud?" Laura brushed the curls from her forehead and kissed her gently. "He would be proud beyond words. And so am I." In the corner of the room, Nyoko stood silently, her gaze tender, her own eyes wet. She did not speak, but the unspoken truth filled the room, pride, love, and the fragile, beautiful hope of second chances. For Laura, it was a future she had never dared to imagine. For Lily, it was the beginning of a path stretching wide and bright. And for Nyoko, it was redemption, a chance to give back, not only what she had been given, but also what she had once lost. They were not bound by blood alone, nor by obligation, but by choice, the choice to step forward together into the unknown. And in that choice they had found something rare, a family born not of perfection, but of love strong enough to carry them all into whatever came next. From a quiet trattoria in Florence to the grand halls of Paris, the journey of Laura, Lily, and Nyoko unfolded like a story no one could have predicted. It began with chaos, a Japanese millionaire gasping for help in a language no one understood, and a child stepping forward with words she had secretly nurtured in solitude. That night revealed not only Lily's extraordinary gift, but also the invisible threads connecting 3 very different lives. What followed was more than a tale of language and intellect. It was a story of second chances, of rediscovering family in the most unexpected of places, and of courage found in the smallest voices. Naoko's return transformed what might have been a passing miracle into something lasting. She saw in Lily the brilliance she had once buried in herself, and in Laura the resilience of a mother determined to guard her child's joy. Through tests and revelations, they discovered that Lily's genius was undeniable, but so too was her heart a rare balance of intellect and empathy. And in the midst of opportunity came the echoes of the past, reminding them all that love, regret, and fate have a way of weaving lives together even across continents and decades. By choosing trust, they stepped into a new kind of family, one not bound by blood alone, but by the deliberate act of caring for one another. The lesson from their story is profound gifts, whether of intelligence, empathy, or courage, are never meant to be hidden. They are meant to be shared, nurtured, and used to bring light where there is confusion or pain. In our own lives, this means recognizing the extraordinary within ourselves and those we love and daring to support it, even when the world doubts or misunderstands. Sometimes, the smallest actions, a kind word, a hidden talent revealed, can change not just one life, but many. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the power of resilience and love, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Your support is what gives us the strength to keep creating meaningful stories. Like this one, stories that remind us of what truly matters.